Hey there, I'm Neil. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the host and producer of Pause and Rewind, the podcast that chats to changemakers, thought leaders and role models who all share a common goal. They're striving to make the world a more inclusive place. And, let's face it, we need it. Each guest has a unique story when it comes to doing their thing, and we often know who people are in the now, but how much do we really know about them? Pause and Rewind takes a moment to explore the experiences, realisations and relationships in my guest's life that led them to where and who they are now, because everyone loves an origin story. We'll dive into tales, anecdotes and a little of what makes our guests tick. So whether you're here for insights or inspo or simply want to know about your heroes, this podcast is for you. You might never know someone's story, but if you pay attention, you'll hear it, you'll see it and you'll feel it. So, are you ready to pause and rewind? Hey Cecile, welcome to Pause and Rewind. It's season 5 and I'm so glad that we're getting this conversation in.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's about time and I'm also looking forward to our conversation.
I'm going to start with the question that I ask all my guests, and that is, what does the world look like for Cécile Deprez right now?
Actually, it's interesting that we have the podcast right now, the podcast recording, because I've been pretty much inactive on the activity you know me for over the past 2 months. I kind of took my winter break, but I'm thinking about, trying this microdosing retirement. So I have a main job, which is where I'm paid like 100% of my time. And on the side of it, I also have some speaker activities, which can be like very exhausting. It sometimes feel like I have 145% job because I have to combine them both. And so I have to say I'm a bit lazy going back into my speaker activities and advocacy work. But anyway, most of my volunteering work is catching up with me right now. So I will have to go back into this anytime soon. But you catch me maybe at the end of my micro dosing retirement phase for this year.
I love that term, microdosing retirement, right? And I think that I have been on quite a similar mindset at the moment with kind of trying to slow down a little bit and actually figuring out what do I want to carry on with and what do I need to take a break from or park for a period of time. So, and actually the work that we do, you know, for those listening, Cecile and I, we collaborate on events with We Create Space, which is very much focused on identity and lived experience and activism and advocacy. And it's tiring, right?
Yeah, it is. I've always been wondering whether I should shift my main work towards something that would be closest to my activism. But I sometimes feel it also is a nice thing to have a job that is completely different because it allows my brain to rest on this aspect. It gives me also maybe more energy to then focus in the activism afterwards. But then you have also to deal with the fact that it's an extra job somehow. So there are good sides and bad sides for this kind of situation.
I mean, I'm very jealous in some ways because my job is inclusion and then I do it with the podcast and so many other things as well. So I completely appreciate the fact that it's what you do day to day is totally different from how you show up in the spaces that we often share. For those listening, are you happy to share more about your day-to-day job? Because I think it's so fucking cool.
Actually, I said it's like entirely different, but I managed to bring a lot of activism in my daily job.
You do.
On paper, it should be very different. So I am a scientist, a researcher, and I work for the German Aerospace Center in the field of space and aerospace. And I work on Galileo, which is the equivalent to GPS, but for Europe. So this is a system of satellites that you use for positioning yourself. So anybody listening to us today has Galileo on their phone, like whether you know it or not, this is just there. So you actually collect the signals that are sent by those satellites that are positioning satellites. And you have a small routine in your phone that allows to compute your position. These signals are combined with other systems like the GPS, but also with the Russian system or the Chinese system, which are all global, positioning systems. And so, my work is kind of developing the next generation of satellites for this European GPS Galileo. So we work closely with the European Space Agency, and we try to integrate in those in the next generation satellites new technologies that have been developed since the previous ones were sent. I think the very first generation of satellites for Galileo was sent in 2011, and because their lifetime is around 15 years, now they need to be replaced. And so this is the opportunity for us as researcher to test new technologies that we've been working on since then and try to see whether all our simulations are actually successful or not. So it's nice because we simulate lots of potential results, but we also get to test them with some missions and actually send satellites with our own experiments on it.
I mean, wow, for starters, like I've never spoke to someone who does what you do, like in the field that you're in. Like it's so cool. And I remember when I was talking to my best friend Janie's niece recently, and she was like, I kind of want to go into kind of like, aerospace stuff. And you very kindly said that you'd be happy to speak to her, because I was just like, I don't know anyone else in that field. What's it like working in that field? Firstly, from a professional perspective, but one thing that I have heard you talk about is what it's like to be a queer person, a woman and a non-binary person in that space.
So, I mean, working in that field is very interesting. I mean, I guess I could find a lot of interest in many different fields in science, but that's true that there is this kind of thing when you mention what you're doing, everybody's like, oh, wow, that's so cool, which is kind of nice. Also, always embarrassing if I still haven't managed to find a proper reaction to this, because in the end, it's my daily job, right? And otherwise, it's a bit challenging at the moment because there is lots of money that is being injected in that field for defense projects. And I'm not working on defense projects, but I can see many of my colleagues either moving to companies focusing on this. And when I say defense, I think more about attack. Like, I think this is always like a weird way of talking about things, because the projects they are going to work on are more about positioning drones and things like this, which definitely tends to be attack instead of defense. So at the moment, there is a big shift in my field, and many people going towards this side. And I had actually to think about this recently. I had an offer to potentially move to a company which does that, and I really cannot. This is not the way I want to. But I understand like we all have different opinions about this, but this is like a big topic at the moment in my field, whether to go towards more defense/attack, or if I manage, which is what I try to do, stay on the research side. And at the moment, for instance, what I'm working on is positioning satellites, which are lower than the one we use for this positioning systems. So LEO satellites, low Earth orbits, that are taking a picture of the Earth and that we use actually to monitor climate change. So this is the kind of things I really want to keep on doing. And I hope I will always have a choice and be able to maintain this kind of work, because it's ethically for me, it's important. So big ethical questions at the moment, I feel.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. I mean, is that something that did you love space as a kid? Like, is it something that you always had your goals set on a role like the one you have?
Not at all. I really ended up here completely by chance. I can tell you later when we go more into my childhood history, but it's complete chance. I'm really happy I'm here, but I wasn't planning it at all.
It wasn't the plan. It wasn't the plan. No. And let's talk about combining your activism with your professional role then, because you're right. Same to me. That's how a lot of my work started, with things like staff networks and organizing events that help shape culture in the workplace. And now, several years down the line, I'm firmly in DEI, and it's activism and it's inclusion, and it's all kind of swirling into one. Is it easy to blend the two? And again, just tapping into that your experience of what it's like being a queer person in that space.
I can tell you already what it felt like to be perceived as a woman in that space. The German Aerospace Center where I work, I remember very well the first day I went there, because it was the interview, and my future team came by to see how I was doing, like just before I got into the interview room. And they were trying to be reassuring. So like, oh, Cecile, you look stressed. I was like, well, yeah, of course. And they're like, oh, but you should not worry, because as a woman, they will hire you anyway. Oh my God. And that hurt so much, because I've got I did my study. I have a master. I did research before. So I was actually so sad to hear this kind of thinking, because that meant all my team members who were identifying as men at that time were looking at me as someone coming and being there only because of their perceived gender, and not even because of my qualities, because of my competencies actually. And so I knew from the very first day that it would be a fight just to be recognized as a valid researcher among them. And I think this would have never been a problem for any individual perceived as men coming to this company. They would always have assumed that, oh yeah, of course he's very competent. But for me, I could definitely see that they were immediately having doubts on the reason why I was hired. So this actually kind of threw lots of doubts on my very first year. I think I was very I was very insecure and thought like, oh, maybe they actually hired me because they perceived me as a woman and they need a quota and things like this. I realized later on that we have job offers that stays without anyone for years and like nobody applying because, as you mentioned, there are not so many people doing what I do. It's really hard to find them. And so nobody hired me just because I was a woman. I actually had like all the certifications I needed to and the experience matching the job. But when you're starting and you all knew, this is actually quite scary. So this kind of set the tone for how it would be then for in my group first to get recognition. And then as we get to work with other teams, also every time is always the same challenge. And I've been here now for 6 years. And I feel that if I'm working with other institutes than mine, I always have to go through the same step of first having most of the men I'm working with recognizing me as a valid colleague to work with somehow, like as someone that is competent enough, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like an actual peer as opposed to
Yes.
tick box. Yeah. Do you still feel that sense of insecurity, or are you much more confident in that space now?
I'm much more confident. I mean, I realized that maybe I don't like, there are many different ways actually of doing research. So I'm good in some ways, some others I'm not so good, but we are all the same. Like we all have like strong points and other points where we are less strong. I'm feeling really, really confident about this. This is much better now. I've got enough experience. And also I won some fights, you know, when I was the only technical experts joining another institute and they were judging me so harsh because I was from another, as a woman, I was the youngest one and I was like non-German. And so I had like so many things against me. And then in the end, I was still the one coming with the expertise. And so I had myself to really train and feel more secure, learn how to take more space physically in the meeting. So like, you know, have a voice that is maybe a bit lower, very calm and like very confident. I had to kind of mimic and like learn how to do that because sadly there is no space. I think I need to say no space in the space field. But there is, I think, no space for people who are not raised as men still in my field. It's very, they require somehow any Flinta individuals to kind of match what is expected from men, you know, like socially. And I try hard not to fall into this, but I think I kind of do it naturally. And many, like when you look at all the women and Flinta people that are in higher position, I think this is very obvious that most of them took very traditionally or masculine qualities to get there, to actually have some recognition and manage to move to those positions. So I think that was like the first thing. It was like sexism was like the most obvious thing arriving there, even though it's not always like very hostile and very straightforward, but all those comments, even if they are like very well-meaning, they can really damage your confidence, as I mentioned, just one time and then bam. So, and my colleagues were very well-meaning saying this. They really wanted me to feel reassured, but not so good. And I think LGBTQ phobia so far has been like a bit more diluted. So some colleagues are like frowning a bit if you come up with, you know, topics into what they consider is your private life. So that's, I think, the biggest form of LGBTQ phobia I would see is whenever there are questions about sexual orientation or gender identity, some colleagues consider this has nothing to do in the workplace and this is a private life matter without realizing that exactly I don't know, like 2 minutes ago, they were talking about their weekend with their wives and children. So actually flaunting their heterosexuality in front of me and like, and there's cisgender privilege, like not even questioning, you know, like their gender identity. So they don't perceive this at all. And so these kind of comments are the things that I would see more like on the LGBTQ phobia that we perceive at work. So it's mostly ignorance, as always.
Yeah. It's not always. We often talk about this in the spaces we're in around microaggressions, which I know is something that you talk so passionately about. Is they're not deliberate, they're not intentional, but the impact remains the same. Yeah, and I think that's something that's so often overlooked is the fact that they're not doing it deliberately. It is just ignorance. However, it's still showing a lack of education, a lack of awareness, a lack of willingness to educate themselves.
Yeah, and at the same time, I understand also if you have no queer people in your life, you have no interest into getting to know that. It's so complex. We have so, like the terminology, like we keep on changing names. And so it must be very confusing. And also, I think that they are very scared of doing something wrong or saying something wrong. So many people actually avoid to get into this topic because just they are so afraid of saying something that would be offensive. But because that they refrain from learning, they're getting like to commit more and more microaggressions, I think. So it's a bit of a tricky loop. And then I'm not exempt like from committing microaggressions myself on topics I'm not familiar with. And there are just so many things to learn that I do believe it's normal that we all do that. The thing that we need to manage to create is a space where we can give feedback about this, and that is not seen as another aggression, to actually go and find someone and say, okay, when you actually say these things, it hurts me a lot, and that we don't feel that if we come and we say that, we will be considered as like too sensitive, or like, I don't know, like this, having like then some maybe ageism with like this young generation who cannot take anything in my time, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, we have to kind of find a way of how we handle the situation. We give a feedback, and understanding that maybe for some people, when I say my pronouns are they, them, and they never used that before, if I get mad and angry, like the first time they make a mistake, then, I mean, when I actually misgender myself sometimes, if I want to speak about myself, that would be like obviously very bad. And this gives them also a bad experience with like the maybe very first non-binary person they meet. Yeah. So we have to come halfway, sadly, because it would be better if we could always be very safe. But that's not the world we live in. I think I'm at peace with that now. But it's a lot of work, I think, and mental effort. And at work, sometimes you wish you wouldn't have to go through this because you already have so much to think about. Then if you have to be careful on all your social interactions, is also an extra load. But I guess we are all used to that.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I've heard you educate on these issues, right? And you do so with an acceptance of meeting people halfway, but you do show a lot of patience and empathy in the way that you educate people and the way that you talk about your own experiences. I don't ever, when you're talking about your experiences, there's impact, but I don't ever get a judgmental tone from you. You very much come at it from a place of grace and understanding.
Thank you for the feedback. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the best way to go. I think last year I was giving an interview for a group of women. Like, they are not very inclusive. I was trying to bring more inclusivity. I was like, I'm non-binary, okay? But so it was a group of women, and they are more like 40, 50 in Munich here, and they are like Francophone, and they were asking what I was doing with the satellites. And then we came on the topic of sexism very quick, and they were very curious about understanding what is sexism in the workplace. Of them had never realized many of the things they experienced and that felt so bad at the time were actually sexism, and it was not them just being too sensitive. But then they had so many questions that came out of ignorance, and sometimes they were kind of insulting themselves by asking the question, or insulting like their family. I remember one was saying, that her daughter had just started studying STEM field, and she was like, yeah, but then with the quota, they're going to hire anyone. They're going to hire women just because they are women. I was like, so wait, you say your daughter will not be qualified after her studies? Oh no, that's not what I mean. It's like, well, that's kind of what you meant. Here I always like resort to asking questions like, can you tell me what the quota is? And then they don't know. I'm just like, yeah, that's equal qualification. And then you hire someone from the minority. But then, it's someone you would have hired because they were fitting the role. But at the end of this interview, then many of the women in the room came to find me to give me this feedback, which still haunt me since that day. They're like, you know what, Cecile? I've always heard of feminists, and I never really liked their tone. And I think like feminists are like angry bitch. But I listened to you today, and you're a feminist, and you were so calm and patient. And I think all feminists should be like you. And I felt so terrible hearing this. I was like, oh my God, it's just because you're not on the phone call I'm going to have with my best friend after this interview, when I'm going to be like, can you imagine this? It does. And of course, we have like different ways of showing ourselves. And if you're doing education, you have to behave in a different way than you do with your friends and family. But yeah, so it was I don't know, it was a terrible feedback. So I was just like, oh my God, 3 people came to tell me, I think feminists are better now that I've spoken with you. Jesus.
I mean, listen, doing the work that we do, sometimes you do have to bite your tongue, right? If you're in professional spaces, you do have to adjust, but it is about having that space afterwards that just says, what the fuck did they actually say that? Like, that's wild. But you are not someone that, I meant it in the most positive way, of course, but I also know you as someone that doesn't hold your tongue. And you do call out injustice, and you do call out the things that need to be called out. I've seen you do it all through the genocide that we're seeing right now with Palestine, with LGBTQ rights. So you're not someone that is afraid to call out injustice.
Thank you for reassuring me back. So sometimes we have feedbacks we were not expecting, I believe, when we do this education work. Yeah, that it doesn't prevent me also like from being a bit like I don't know, like from clashing a bit also during the question and answer at that time, because I'm also having fun, and so sometimes I'm releasing a bit of pressure by making a little joke that is also a little bit of an attack on the person that I
Absolutely. Bring it, and you bring humor into it as well. And we have to channel the rage. The rage needs to come out somehow. So it needs to come out. I'm really excited to dive into your origin story. But before I do, I just want to focus. Last year was a really cool year for you in terms of being recognized for your work as well.
Yeah, it was indeed. Thank you for pointing it out. Like, I don't know why everything happened last year, but I won't complain, of course. I was, I think first, I was finalist for the German Women Engineer award, which is really funny because I'm neither a woman or an engineer, but I was still one of the finalists. It was a bit sad though, because like during the presentation of the 3 finalists, they completely misgender me the whole way. So it was just like, oh, so Cécile Deprez, who uses they, them pronouns, she studied, and I was like, oh my God, no.
Wow.
That was so bad. So yeah, but anyway, I was still like the head of my company, which is 12,000 employee, actually had to sign and give their approval for me to apply to this. So that was nice to know that like such a, my company was backing me up. And then with Recreate Space, I was also a queer leader last year. And actually I realized, thanks to you, that I was doing corporate activism because I never knew before.
That's what you're doing.
And that was fantastic. Like that was a fantastic weekend in Barcelona. It's in my heart. I just love it so much.
Same.
And I also received then from my company the very first award that they created for contributions to equal opportunities. And that felt good after 6 years of fighting. I mean, it's not always fighting. I have to admit, I had lots of support, but I mean, not always. It's always a bit of a challenge though. And I think I poked many people. Like I sent so many emails to everyone. I actually had the chance to meet like the diversity management and many people I had bothered over the years last October, and I was so stressed out because I realized they might all hate me very much. But anyway, we did great things together, even though maybe, I don't know, I gave them a bit of extra work and extra things to think about. And it was really good that this company, in the end, like after putting a bit of barriers and sometimes like not being so receptive, showed such appreciation by dedicating and creating this award first, and then that I like giving it to me as a first recipient. I really feel great.
Fantastic.
So I'm grateful for all these recognitions, really.
So well deserved, and I hope that the recognition continues.
I
Cecile,
think I'm good.
you're good. You're done, right?
I have to say, like the recognition that actually was the most impactful was the one for me, Create Space, because being nominated by your own community and, like receiving an award, like from your own community, that was like just so beautiful. I think like maybe many queer people might feel this, like you sometimes have a bit of an imposter syndrome. And at my first year as a queer person, I was like, am I like really queer? Like I'm calling myself a lesbian, but I dated men for so many years. Like, am I a true lesbian? These kind of things. And you really doubt yourself. And having your own community being like, Cecile, like we acknowledge your effort and what you do. That was really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful to see you recognised, and again, you deserved it. Like, and it was such a beautiful experience to share that with so many other amazing queer leaders.
Yes.
Yeah. It's an amazing community. Cecile, we're going to dive into your origin story. So, with that, are you ready to pause and rewind?
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Here we go. Take me back. Take me back. Tell me all about little Cecile.
Little Cecile, I was ballet dancer.
Okay.
I did ballet dancing for 16 years, so that was a big part of my life. Otherwise, I think I don't know, I have a mixed vision of myself as a kid. I always, for some reason, believed as a kid I had no personality. It's not a thing. Like, I don't know anyone that doesn't have a personality, but I was convinced, like, I was not strong enough or I didn't have a personality. And my parents got a divorce when I was very young, and we were the only one in the school. It was a country school, and like we were the only one with parents getting a divorce, my sister, my brother, and I remember like there was a lot of stigma, and I was crying a lot. And I think from that time I believed that I had like a no personality, and I was just a crying little kid or something. It really like had me, I think, for very many years. But when I look back now, I realized that very early on, I started my career as an activist, because when I was 10, my father had like 2 kids with my stepmother, and my family on my father's side rejected him completely. So that's my cat. When my father got a divorce with my mom, they actually like rejected him from the family. And so I have always been defending my dad and like standing in front of my whole family, supportive of my dad. And then when my sister were born, all my family was not like mentioning their names. And whenever they were talking about them, they were saying like stepsister and like emphasis on the stepsisters. And I was always like, no, these are my sisters. And I was 10 and I was like very strongly believing in like the power of the words and I don't know why it came to me like this, but I was convinced like you have to use the right words and this matters a lot. Like this emphasis on the step sister, I could really feel it was a way to trying to set us apart. It was like, that won't work with me. Yeah, it's funny to believe like how I had this dual thing that I, on one side, perceive myself as a crying little girl with like no power on everything. And at the same time, I was like very strong in my beliefs already and in my advocacy work with my whole family.
You're right. Like the duality of those two things is quite strange. It's hard to consider that, isn't it? When you look back at like which one was the more dominant force, and we can, I guess, kind of like you can see the strength coming through. When did I don't know whether it's self-doubt about how you were showing up, but when did that shift and you stop thinking that about yourself?
Many years later.
Really?
It took me a very long time. Yeah. I've always been very afraid of what, people would perceive of me. But again, in a very weird way, because I would never be afraid of speaking out for other people where I believe was right and fighting injustice where I would see it. And at the same time, while I've always been like attracted to women and I've always been fantasizing about women, I've tried so hard to try to date men, and that was a failure for most of my life. But I felt like, oh yeah, I have to do this and I have to get into a long-term relationship because my family expects that. My friends are living this. And so I always felt like so much pressure, but yeah, somehow I wouldn't stand up for myself, but like for others, which I think is something that many activists do. And we have to learn with self-love that we are also worth standing up for. But it takes a lot of years. At least for me, it took many years to do that. I didn't have very strong figure. Like on my mother's side, when I was a kid, she was very depressed. And this wasn't obviously like giving me lots of, like a lot of inspiration about how to take care of yourself, because like she was the last one, I think, to take care of herself. So yeah, like as a motherly figure, she was not the one who gave me this feeling that I mattered and I really had to fight for myself as well. But I understood for some, I don't know from where, that for the others, I was there and I could be there.
Yeah. Do you think that is why you do advocate for yourself right now in terms of kind of like you've had to, in terms of the professional space that you work in terms of your non-binary identity and people using the right pronouns, using the right language and terminology? Is it something that you still have to work on now?
Yeah, I realize I don't think it's bad though. I think it's like a normal evolution and I'm fine with the level I've got now, like of, fighting for myself. But I still see a difference, like some things that I accept happening to me. And if it was one of my friends, I would react very differently. So this is something I also give very often in my trainings as an advice to people when they ever doubt themselves and they're like, oh, well, but is it really that bad? Like, okay, picture your best friend having the same experience. Like, what would you do? And most of us are like, oh my God, I would burn the place down. You're like, there you are.
Yeah. That big question of would you talk to your best friend the way you talk to yourself is something that we need to ask themselves. As someone that self-flagellates a lot, I need to take that advice as well. So let's take it back a little bit. What are perhaps some of your earliest memories, activists aside, or maybe a favorite anecdote that you've heard about yourself?
We were living in the countryside. And like I think like my favorite memories from when I was a kid is like our commando missions. We were gathered with the neighbors and we would go into the fields and we would go in the fields where the cows were and they were very aggressive. So it was a challenge to get into the field and not get caught by the cows, which was very dangerous, but we thought it was amazing. And so as kids, we spent lots of time doing this or like playing, like actually, I don't even know how to say it in English, but when they collect like all the fields and stuff. Like they make those big balls, like how do you call it? Of like hay.
A ball of hay.
Yeah. Then we were also playing like with this, but yeah, all these things were actually pretty dangerous. But I think in the countryside, this is a regular thing that the children disappear for the afternoon, and then you find them. If you find them in the evening, you're really happy.
those days of being free. What were you like?
Sorry, I just wanted to point out it's actually interesting that I really cherish this memory, and at the same time I was already very challenged because most of the neighbors were like young boys, and so I was already like trying to fit in a group of boys, as like a very young kid and not show my fears and do like, the toughest thing to show that I was not a little girl who was crying, which was also my perception of myself. So I think it kind of, pushed me also to go and participate into those things and always be, like the one who would take the first risk of things like this, because I didn't want to be perceived as a crying little girl. So I think from a very young age, I understood very well the gender expectations, or like how gender was perceived in society, and like how I could try to mix from one gender to another, realizing also very soon that it was never going to happen. That if I was perceived as a little girl, I would never be fitting in the group of little boys.
Yeah. And for all these years later, being in the industry that you're in and having to almost do the same.
Yes, that's exactly like, it's funny actually.
Yeah. What were you like at school?
At school, I was always interested in pretty much everything. When I was in secondary school, I actually studied Latin and advanced mathematics. And when it was time to decide what to do afterwards, because all my family went to university, I think I was like, of course, I'm going to go to university. It's it seems like a logical way. And I wasn't so sure. Like I was very interested in literature. At the same time, I really like science. And then I had taken advanced mathematics because I thought maybe I could try and be an engineer, even though I had no idea what was an engineer. I thought it was really hard to perceive what they were doing. But then in this advanced mathematics class, I was mostly with boys again. And I remember they were laughing and they were saying that in the studies at university, there were no real women, because the only women there were lesbians, and this is not real women. I got really scared. So it has been years now that I was thinking, am I a lesbian? No. I'm going to decide today I'm not a lesbian. No, I'm not a lesbian. And I think like every month I was like, well, just to be sure, I'm going to ask myself again, am I a lesbian? It's like, no, I possibly can't be. And if I think about this like so often, that means that I'm very sure I'm not. And I kept on thinking about this. When they mentioned like, oh no, in engineering, it's only lesbians, it actually scared me so much. It was like, okay, I'm not doing engineering. Science is safer. And because my mom was a doctor, my stepmother as well, I was like, okay, science is a place where I see women as well, so I'm not afraid of going there. Yeah, it's really funny. Like if I could tell them now that I'm actually working as an engineer and I'm also a lesbian, I was fitting perfectly. I don't know why I didn't win for it.
What was all that fear about? So so science was the avenue that you were going to go down. That's where you thought you wanted to be.
Yeah, although like that's really not the thing I studied initially, like so math and Latin. But science, I had like the lowest number of hours. So I struggled a lot when I went to university in science. I was like, oh, wow, much more complex than I thought.
Yeah, for sure. I ended up doing a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and I struggled. I found it really hard. It did not come naturally to me. What were teenage years like for you?
As I mentioned, like there were all these questions about my sexual orientation. I kept on pushing back any boy that was coming near me. And we were like the weird group in the school. Like I've always been like in the weird group of people. In primary school, we were like 3 outcasts staying together always. And when I moved to secondary school, so like from 11 years old, I met like these girls. They were all wearing like super colorful outfits, like very childish like, and we got along so well. These are still my best friend to this day. So this group of friends like was very strong, but we were the ones sitting down, like on the floor, and everybody was looking at us like, who are those weirdos? But we were very proud of like standing out and just like not really giving a fuck about the others. And as a group, we felt like lots of cohesion out of this, I guess. We all liked the same things, and yeah, like colors. I'm usually wearing lots of colors here. I'm like completely in dark, but like that's usually not the case. I think it's still from that time. So I had like a solid group of friends through my teenage, but I never talked with them about what I felt, about my sexual orientation, because most of them, like, they never asked themselves this question. They started dating guys and they had like relationship of 1 or 2 years with like guys, with men. And I was like, okay, maybe something is wrong with me. And I had like in this group, like my best friend, and we were doing everything together. We were spending all our time. I was madly in love with her, like Marie. She's still like my best friend now, but I think I just could not picture anyone else I wanted to spend time with.
Have you had conversations with your best friend about this now?
Yeah, she knows. Yeah, no, but so I think I was just very lost and confused and very afraid that I was not fitting. And I was very aware I was not fitting in many ways, like what was expecting of me.
When did you first kind of like feel at ease with your sexuality?
It's actually a tough question because when I came out to my brother and my sister, I think I was 26, and I was like, I'm going to come out officially. And my sister and my brother, both of them, like, I talked to them separately, and they were like, yeah, okay, so you like women, yeah. Oh, do you mean you're coming out? I'm so sorry, I didn't. I was like, yeah, I'm coming out to you. Like, but it's been years, isn't it? So to me, it was news. I think for years I talked about loving women and finding women beautiful, and like how it was so easy to connect to women, but I didn't think that was lesbianism. I thought like, yeah, women are amazing. Like everybody loves them, obviously. So I thought that was completely like the way everybody was thinking about women. I didn't think it had anything to do with my sexual orientation. So it was really funny because my coming out to my family was a bit of a flop.
It sounds like in a beautiful way, though.
Yeah. I mean, the most loving way you could go.
That's amazing. Let's rewind a little bit. What was your university experience was like, and what was the goal at that point, do you think?
So arriving at university, I realized that men like me because I was in a field where it was then, again, mostly men. And then I was like, oh, wow, actually, like they all want something from me. And I felt like very powerful. And at the same time, I didn't want to have to deal with any of this attention in any other way than making jokes about it. So I always was wearing a flower in my hair at the time and making the joke every time someone was taking out. I was like, oh, you just deflowered me. But that was something I was really uncomfortable about because I was 21 and I never had any sexual experience because I was just not interested. And I think at some point at university, I picked a guy. He was not very beautiful, but he was nice. And I knew he would like keep it low. And we had like, I had my first sexual experience. I say it was actually not my first, but I thought it was because there was a dick involved. And that was just so not interesting. Not because of him. I think he did like a really good job. I just didn't care.
Oh, no.
So it's not a shame on the guy. It's just like, obviously I was not interested, but yeah, it took me, it took me years to kind of realize, okay, I'm done. Like I've tried so many different ways. With men actually doesn't really work for me and I can move on. But so university was a bit this time where I tried some relationships, but I was always like so bored. And like after 2 months, I was like, it doesn't work. And I could not really explain why. I think I hurt many people in that way. And it was also a tough time because my dad died when I was at university. I was 20 and he was very sick for 3 years, like cancer. And because he was being treated in Belgium, but like my stepmother at the time was living in Switzerland. I was the one here taking care of him. Like as I mentioned, I always been like very protective of him. And so for 3 years, I really became like a nurse in many different aspects. Like I spent 6 months at the hospital with him. I lived there, I studied there. I was studying in the study room, which was my big joke at the time, I remember. And then when he like the last months of his life, he was treated at home. And I was like taking the role of the nurses, during the day because we had like professional nurse coming in the morning and the evening, but then you learn, what you have to do. And so I spent like lots of time with him, and I think this had a big impact on how I was perceiving my life because I guess many people have the experience of having someone close to them who gets sick, and you realize that there is no way you can actually make any plans for your life because it can shift like from one day to the other. So one day you're full of hope because you got a good news. The next day something like is crashing and it's like this is never gonna work. And so you keep on going like from like ups and lows. And you have to learn to just enjoy the moment. I think this is where I developed maybe my love language, which is quality time. Like definitely, it's just when I'm there and I'm spending time with you, I enjoy every single bit of it. And I don't want to be distracted by anything else because I want you and I want to spend time with you. So I think this was what I learned from that time. It was of course like a lot with university, but I've always been an excellent student. So I always had like really good grades and it didn't change at university as well. Just the first year was a bit more challenging, but otherwise it was fine. And actually I went into a field that my father kind of advised to me because he was professor at university. And I remember when I was struggling to know what I would do at university, a friend of his, also a professor, said, oh, you should try geomatics. And I was like, what? Geomatics? And it's like, yeah, it's a mix of geography and informatics. And they have like 6 students a year. There's no one. And you get out of there, you're going to get a job immediately. It's interesting. It's in science. So if you want to do science, just go into this. And so this is what I did. And in the end, like after the first year, which was common to all science, I went into this option. And this is where I discovered like satellite positioning, because acquiring the data from the satellites and actually computing your position, this is also part of what we would call geomatics. And so, yeah, I discovered my field of work through this studies. But as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, it was completely by chance.
Yeah. Just that conversation with someone just changed everything very quickly.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really funny. It was just like in a hall in the hospital. It was just like,
Yeah.
hey, hi, nice to see you. Oh, you're struggling to know what to do. Try geomatics. Okay.
Look at where you are now. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious, are you happy for me to ask, like, what were those months like with your father? I mean, I can imagine, as you said, challenging with university and sad because of what he was going through. But I guess some people, when they lose someone, they lose them quite suddenly. It's not always expected. Did you get to have some big conversations?
I wouldn't say big conversation. I think I've always been a bit afraid of my dad. Like he was a professor at university. He knew so much, and even though like they were not very conscious of it, but I think like there was still like a very sexist way of raising their children.
Okay.
So my brother at the time like was always allowed to speak his mind at the table, but I think when I was speaking I was very insecure, and I was made to feel insecure about my own opinions. So I never felt I could have, or at least this is a feeling I've got, that maybe I was always a bit afraid when talking to my dad of, he has also this way of saying like, oh, you really like this horrible thing? And she's like, yeah, actually that's my favorite band. So like those kind of way of speaking, which is like, I don't know what to think right now. So I think big conversation, now that I remember, but also because I got to spend lots of time with him for the first time in my life, because he was very absent, having like another family. I never get to have so much time with my dad. So those 3 years I got to know him. And when I look at the videos of the past year of his life, of the last year of his life, I can see that I'm actually answering back at him and like being much more confident. Otherwise, he was always like a figure that I would look up to, but maybe be a bit scared of. And yeah, in Belgium, there is you can have like a euthanasia, which is what my dad chose. So when he was really not feeling good anymore, he decided that one day someone is coming and it's going to be the end. And so all the family was there that day, and we all went to talk to him. And I remember he took my brother, my sister, and I, like the elder children, and he was like, yeah, I have like one request for you, is please maintain unity with your two little sisters. Like you, the five of you get along so well. Like we were spending all our holidays together. We made so many movies. Like we have like tons of movies that we made together. We had lots of fun with that. And yeah, his wish was really that we maintain this unity. And I'm really glad we did, because I love, like, I've got a fantastic family. I love them all. But yeah, I say that's the biggest conversation I remember with him. Like what mattered the most to him is that we always take care of each other when he's not there, which I believe is a kind of a healthy wish. Like when you're a father and you're gonna, you know,
Yeah.
you're not gonna be there. So yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful that you've maintained that as well.
I put lots of effort into it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess I've never spoken to someone about euthanasia before. And so it's just it's quite striking to me to hear someone talk about what that last conversation was like and the impact it had on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not the only person in my family who died that way. Also, my grandma, she decided to go that way. She was living in Switzerland, and there they have a service, actually. It's called Exit, and you can call them. And she was 80. She was doing fine, but like she had arthrosis in her hands and she couldn't write and anything. And she had always been living on her own. And yeah, she was like, okay, then I guess I'm good. And so she called the service. She called us. She was like, okay, in 3 days it's happening. Are you coming? Like, we got to be there. And we had like this 3 days just together discussing, making all the arrangement. I think she did that with my mom and her brothers. But then also just with us, like the great children, like just enjoying time together. And also it feels very good to know, you know, this, like she was ready. She was so excited on the morning it was supposed to happen.
Really?
She couldn't wait. Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, like she hugged us all and we were all there, and then you just like let her go. So I think also there is something very reassuring in knowing that your family accepts that you're leaving. Like, of course, everybody's going to be sad, but still, like, people are giving you some kind of blessing. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's your choice and we accept it and we are with you, and we just like wish you all the best. And I think that might be also reassuring. Actually, I really want to go that way. I hope I will have this opportunity when I'm older.
I was going to ask what were your thoughts around it as well. But so thank you for
Yeah.
sharing. I just it's just not something that I've ever heard anyone speak about. It's not something I've particularly thought about before. And I think it's definitely maybe a cultural thing, is that not many people speak about death and losing someone in such a positive way.
It's also, I mean, it's the only thing you're very sure about in your entire life is that you're going to die eventually. So I feel it's so hard, like in places where you cannot decide of the way you want to be, like, and the way you want to go, because I mean, this is something that we should have like control over in some way. Like, I mean, we, of course, like, there are accidents and things like this, but you don't have to just wait to die. I guess, like, it would be better for everybody to be able to make their own decision. And if this is like a religious choice not to do this, also I understand. But for people for whom that doesn't matter, then they should be also available. So I'm glad that I was in Belgium and my dad had this opportunity. And my grandmother, she moved to Switzerland actually just because of that, because she was planning this for a very long time.
Wow.
And she wanted to be sure nobody would stop her.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to choice, right? And it comes
Yeah.
down to choice and being able to have that choice. And, you know, whether that is choice around when it's your time to go, or bodily autonomy, or how we identify and who we love.
Yeah.
Choice and freedom in that is so important and healthy. But
there are countries where this is allowed, so I mentioned them here for anyone interested. And as a family, I thought it was a very strong experience and beautiful in some ways.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I'd love to know, is there a moment when you think about your career that felt like a failure that turned out to be the making of you?
Well, there is a big, I don't know, something that society would see as a huge failure in my career, which is the fact that I never finished my PhD thesis. So after my master, I was offered the possibility to stay at university to work on a PhD thesis. So I did my master thesis on the topic of satellite positioning. That was the first time I was really getting into that topic. And with the PhD, I actually had the chance to pursue and get to know more and start like working really into this. I mean, I didn't have to look for a job. I was always a good student and I was like, oh, I'm going to do it. And my father used to be a researcher, so I was a bit curious, I guess, also to know what this was about. But it turned out to be a terrible experience. I think like one of the worst experiences in my life. I stayed 4 years there because there is so much pressure from society. When you start a PhD, that you should be finishing it. And if you've been an excellent student your entire life, people are like, why would you not manage? And I think, I mean, maybe, I don't know, like the biggest factor for me was the relationship with my supervisor, which had been a disaster with all the other students before. And like there were like so many things that were wrong. Like, I don't know. I'm not getting too much into details because I don't want to be, called for defamation or stuff like this. But because of this terrible relationship, the fact that I was completely isolated, and that was actually a strategy, like all the PhD students were always on their own with no other resources than this person, it really became like hell for me. And I had a very big depression in the last 2 years of my thesis. And I don't know, I happened to lose my little niece who was 7 weeks, and my grandfather at like a 2 weeks interval, the summer just before starting my fourth year. Actually, it was devastating. Like it's a little baby, and it's not what it should be. Like this is not what you expect when there is such a happy event taking place 7 weeks before. But I realized like those things, I would process them and I would manage to process all these terrible feelings. But going back to work in September, that was just impossible. I just could not. And this is where I realized like something was deeply wrong. And as I mentioned at the time, I was really bad at doing advocacy for myself. So I always believed that if something was wrong, I mean, I wasn't doing it correctly, and I had a hard time picturing that someone could actually harm me. Like in this case, it was like very intentional, I do believe. So I, for the first time, went to see a psychologist, and the first session changed my life because I explained a bit the reason why I was going there. She was like, okay, you know that I would call what you describe moral harassment, and you are in a state of depression. It was like, what? These two news were like blowing my mind. And I was like, okay, so, wow. And like over the session, she just explained to me how I had feelings and I could like live them. So being sad was completely fine. Being angry was even like more fine. And I could actually shout, I could break things, like maybe not people's arms and stuff, but if I needed to, like I could just punch into my cushion or anything, just express the rage and just stop masking everything and trying to pretend everything's okay. She pointed out, like, every time I was speaking about my father who had died a few years ago, I was crying and laughing. And she was like, Cecile, you look so weird right now. Like, you shouldn't be like this. Like, either you're sad and you cried, but don't try to laugh at the same time. You have developed so many coping mechanisms so that you can try to hide all your emotion. It's okay. Like, we can just work on this. So I think this they changed my life, like putting words on what was happening and actually showing that something, I was not just the one responsible. Like, and it's a relationship. So obviously there are things I've done that aggravated the relationship, I assume, and things like this. But it was not only me. And actually, like, someone who had already had this pattern of behavior with other people was doing the same on me. So it felt like for the first time, I was like, okay, so I experienced something pretty bad. It's time to acknowledge this. And so I had like a very big internal fight with like this little demon in my head, which I actually represented like a COVID, like this COVID virus thing. I think I always picture it this way, and which was telling me all the time that I was not enough, that I was like not a good researcher, that I would never manage and things like this. I had like this very big fight to kind of tune it down and like tone it down and like say, like, okay, like you're there, but whatever you say is actually not the truth. And I you're just like lying to me right now. And so when I finished this year of psychotherapy, and which was my last year or so paid for my thesis, they offered me 6 more months to conclude it. And I was like, you know what? It's actually, if I take those 6 more months, I feel it might kill me. It's so bad. And I've realized like how bad the situation is. For my mental health, I just want to say no. So I didn't take the 6 months. Instead, I moved to Germany, far away. I put a distance, kilometers, actually, hundreds of kilometers away from there. And with a team, like a completely new team where there was like no relationship with my ex-supervisor. And I started there, and it was COVID immediately when I moved in there. And for 3 months, I was stuck at home, working, but at home. And I actually took the time to reflect, because I had said no to the 6 months extension, but I was still registered as a student at university to finish my PhD. And they asked me at the end of that year in June, like whether they should pursue, like if I wanted to finish the PhD, basically was the question. And yeah, because of those 3 months, I think like just by myself in a country where I knew no one, where I just was reading, enjoying it was beautiful weather. I was outside with the cats all the time, and I was taking care of myself for the first time. I was just like, okay, actually, no, I'm never ever going back into that environment, because why would I have to? I mean, I know what it is to do research. I'm very good in my field. That's the reason why I have been hired at the German Aerospace Center. German Aerospace Center is like a very big place. Like it's very prestigious to be there. And I was like, I'm fine. I don't need to do it. I think there is also potentially like an ADHD brain of mine that has a terrible time finishing thing that was very satisfied with the sensor. Anyway, whatever it is, it just, it felt very right at the moment to stop this completely. And even though here they offered me to kind of make a collaboration between where I was before and the German Aerospace Center to finish the thesis or start a new one even, I'm done. I'm good. Like that was a very bad experience in my life. I'm not looking forward to starting it again. And I think you were saying, what are the good things that come out of this feeling of failures? I think standing up against society, maybe for the first time, like that openly. I mentioned how I struggle with society expectations in my entire life. And I think that was one of the first time where I was just like, okay, I'm going against everyone's advice. Like my family, they were like, oh, come on, just hold on 6 months and you'll finish it. And I was just like, no, now I'm speaking for myself. It's a no. And so that was a huge change. And also like being in a research environment, not having a PhD and have quit, it's also something you have to be strong about. And, being able to tell people like, no, I'm not going to do a new one. Yes, I quit my PhD and that's how it is, and you can judge me however you want. It won't affect me because I took this decision and I'm very at peace with it. But so that was a huge challenge in the end.
Yeah. What a story, and one of absolute resilience and empowerment, actually.
Yeah, a journey into yourself.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned at the beginning that you didn't have any role models and such, and so or no one to look up to that taught you how to self-advocate. And I wonder, is there someone from your career or your life that has shaped you the most?
No, I think all the books I've read, like by fantastic Flinta writers, I've read mostly like Flinta authors, and like reading their experience, like many in STEM, but many also not in STEM, and just like how strong they were, how resilient, inspired me a lot. So I've read a lot of books. I think so I've got a collection of people that I found are completely amazing. And I think I don't have like one person I idealize, but it's more of a collection of, gathering the strengths of so many people across generation, places, and across time. I think this is kind of how I built maybe the resilient side or the fighting side, or where I find my inspiration sometimes. It's just, I know like that they have been there, that I'm not the only one. We all face the same thing all the time. It's just cycles. And it gives me a lot of strength to knowing that these people, they know so much and they've learned so much, and this is just so inspiring.
Looking back so far, what are you most proud of to date?
I'm still very much into my brain, but I think it's the fact that I managed to listen a bit more to my body over the years, realizing how the both of them are very much connected, and that all these experiences that I've had, I managed to give them back now also. So all this training, all the groups I co-founded and I manage, and all the volunteering work I'm doing, I really try to channel the energy I have, but also what I've learned from those experiences that were not always so easy. And like, you cannot teach people things they don't want to hear, of course, but at least hint that there are other ways of doing things. And then if ever they have questions, you're going to be there and you're going to be very receptive to whatever they have to say. I think that's maybe like the nicest thing is like all this experience that were really bad. I think in the end, I managed to make something positive out of all of these, whether it's like the discrimination at work, where I actually use it now like to give talks about, like, and the more colleagues discriminate against me, the more money I make somehow. It's just like, wow, that's great. Keep on going. No, it's more of a joke, but yeah, they kind of built my conferences and without knowing it, just by being dicks, like they actually helped me quite a lot. So I think it's this feeling that your own struggles and life experiences, you can somehow pass them on to other, like this experience, like actually what I've had in those books, and that these people can feel inspired by it, and that it may change some people's life. So just one sentence you say, the way you say something. I had like so many people reaching out to me and be like, oh, that's, when you said this, like, I don't know, when you call yourself an immigrant, Cecile, that actually struck me. And I thought, like, yeah, that's right. I always called myself an expat, but what is, this kind of, it's a tiny thing, right? But it starts conversation, and like people question themselves or they feel empowered. And I think this is like the most grateful thing, is like this harsh experience when you can see that something very positive comes out of it.
The House of Happiness is London's ultimate sober clubbing extravaganza. We're led and delivered but created for all, whether teetotal, sober curious, or just taking a booze snooze. We love a day rave, and on a Saturday afternoon you can expect banging house tunes, DJs on decks, dancers on podiums, and a fully stocked alcohol-free bar. Flamboyant, bold, with a glitter station to boot. We're all about safe, inclusive fun, and we even have a pre-meet so that you can make new sober buddies before you hit the dance floor. Grab your tickets from Instagram now at House of Happiness Official, and we'll see you on the dance floor.
Are you ready for some quickfire questions?
Yeah.
What album, book, or movie has had a lasting impact on you?
So a book that I really loved was the Mythobiography from Audre Lorde. I don't know if you read it, Zami, A New Spelling of My Name. I love it, like, just because I love Audre Lorde, but also because this book turned me on so much. I read it and was like, oh my God, if I ever needed a confirmation of how gay I am, like, this book just gave it to me. The way that she writes about the women she loved is just so beautiful. I don't know, it's just, I think, capture the way I perceive women so well. And yeah, I think that was a huge, I loved reading this book. Like, it was fantastic. It's like a sun. I don't know, it felt like everything was like more bright afterwards.
I love that. I love the unapologetic nature of Audre Lorde.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's a saying you live by and one that you put in the bin?
Well, actually, for this one, I have a French saying that is a bit of a combination of your two questions. So my grandmother always used to say, like, far from your eyes is far from the heart. I don't know if it exists in English, but this is what we say in French. And actually, I'm passionate about all my friendships. Like, I've got very long-lasting friendship, and I love my friends dearly. But it can happen that if I don't see you for 6 months, I kind of forget that you exist, but that doesn't mean that I don't love you anymore. So it's kind of like the sentence from my grandmother doesn't really encapsulate that. But yeah, this is for me, the fact that I can love my friends very dearly and somehow at the same time forget that they exist if I don't see them for a long time.
I mean, firstly, the joys of ADHD, right? Like, and object permanence, and the fact that kind of applies to people. But also, there's the saying that absence makes the heart grow fonder. That actually, I think if you're comfortable with someone, you don't need to be in their pocket all the time. Like they can be going off living their life and you can just connect when it's right for you.
Yeah, that's also something that anyway you have to go through, I guess, like when you're living as an immigrant, like you meet like many other immigrants and everybody's moving all the time. So you make friendships and then people are leaving. That doesn't mean it's the end. You just like have to maintain them with more distance, like physical.
What's been the best adventure of your life so far?
I think it's not my adventure, but it's somehow was dragged in. I think it's when my sister transitioned. So I think that changed my entire family. And I mentioned my mom has been depressed for a long time. And I think when my sister transitioned, she finally realized she had to be there and she had to stand by her daughter and she had to advocate for her, which was potentially the first time she had to actively defend her daughter against people like dead naming her or like using wrong pronouns. And then my mom had suddenly to advocate and she changed so much and our relationship evolved and I'm so close to my sister. Like we call each other every day. Like we are so aligned. Like we have exactly the same kind of humor, which is like terrible, but we love it. And that works so good. And yeah, so it's, I think this experience of her drastically changed my life, my family, and I love my family so dearly.
That is so beautiful. What 3 words would you use to describe you and your origin story?
Okay, so out of the blue, without having discussed it for the last 10 minutes, what about resilience, fluid, and contradictory?
So Cecile and I, for those listening, had a big discussion about these words, which we're not going to feature in the recording. Cecile, I'm really curious. In terms of the order of those words, you know, those words were some of many that we kind of discussed. Is there an order for how they appear in your life? Like, is that the right order for them? How do you feel about the order of them?
Yeah, I think resilience is great in the first position, but then I'm fluid, so the other two could shift. It wouldn't matter too much to me. Contradictory, I mean, in many ways. Because I'm fluid, go ahead with whatever you feel is the nicest one because it doesn't really matter.
I love it, but there's an ease about it. I think there's an ease about it that emanates with an ease.
A lack of personality. Maybe I was right all along.
Absolutely fucking not. Absolutely fucking not. Let's fast forward a little bit. What exciting things do you have coming up?
Well, as I say, I'm like recovering from this like small retirement period. So at the moment, I mean, I have to answer emails actually to discover what is going to come up. Maybe like still a few talks this year, but I might just tune it down a bit. But otherwise, in my day work, exciting projects because, as I mentioned, sometimes we send satellites to validate whatever we do, and this is going to be the case in a few years. So we're working on this huge project with like many other companies, and this is definitely really interesting. And at the moment, I feel why not spending a bit of time focusing also on what I'm actually paid to do.
I hear ya. What brings you joy?
Many things. I go on walks with my cat. That brings me a tremendous amount of joy.
I love that you walk with your cat because, like, I have friends that have, including my boyfriend, who tried to walk his cat, and like a lot of cats hate it.
Well, I mean, we don't use a leash. Like she used to go on her own, and then one day I was like, "Oh, I'm coming along with you," but she was so happy, and then she just stick with me, you know, and we go and we explore together. And then sometimes she is a bit afraid because there are so many dogs where I live. So she has her little spot where I just leave her there. And she's like, I see you later. And I go and I continue to walk and I come back and she's just waiting for me. She has been playing and doing her own things, but she's completely certain I'm coming back. And so she always wait. I came back like an hour, 2 hours or 3 hours later. She's going to be there. And she's like, oh, okay, time to go. Let's go. Then she's a fantastic cat. I've never had this. I mean, she's also like a massive mice killer, which is like not the best side, but going on walks with her is like a pure joy.
I can imagine. Do you have a practical takeaway for anyone wanting to either carve out a career in inclusion or create an inclusive space or project?
What worked really good for me was I made an agreement that everything I had to experience that was discriminatory, for instance, in my workplace, I would make sure that the newcomers would not have to go through the same things. And so that's what drives me actually the most. Sometimes I feel I'm a bit masochistic by like staying in an environment which is not so safe. But at the same time, it's a huge driver. So finding a place that is safe, and using the energy from seeing some injustice and being like, okay, you know what? I've seen this, and this I decided I will find any way I can to make sure that this doesn't happen, or like to maybe like reduce the extent of the damage, I think it's a good thing to challenge yourself. So yeah, we discussed also about self-challenging. I think this is my advice to go to, and please don't also like be too harsh on yourself. You get to meet lots of people doing this work and you're not alone. So if a problem is too big for you, just unite. I would be my second advice. Find other people, unite, and it's going to give you lots of energy, lots of new ideas, so much inspiration, and then it's just a beautiful adventure and you meet fantastic people. And you're the best example, Neil.
Thank you so much. Right back at you 100%. I was thinking while you were saying that, like, it's one of the most grateful things that I feel about working in this space.
Yeah.
Whenever I say
I can
space, I'm
imagine.
now thinking of you, but also we create space. It always happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is the people you meet. It really is. My final question for you is this. Do you have any words of encouragement or wisdom for anyone out there to help them get to wherever they're going?
We are in a world that is based on violence, and any bit of comfort, of love, and of support we can give to each other is the most beautiful thing. So keep cherishing that, nurturing this, and channeling it.
Amazing words to finish on. Cecile, I have loved spending this time with you and getting to know more about you. Thank you for all the ways that you show up in the world. I'm always so grateful to be in your company.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was lovely speaking with you, and I'm really happy I contribute to your podcast.